Guys, this week for our interview, we've been lucky enough to land Jordan Garber. This gentleman is a podcaster, he's a journalist, he's the host of Cut the Promo. He also spends time refereeing and spends a lot of time in the snake pit. So guys, enjoy this interview and we'll be right with you. Hi Jordan, how you doing? This is AJ.
Hey, how's it going, my man?
Good, great to hear from you. It's going to be me and my co-host, my producer Joe, that are going to be sitting in on this interview today. Very excited to hear from you. Big fans of a lot of your work, and we appreciate what you do, especially a lot of the interviews that you do. My producer Joe is going to start off with a line of questioning, and if you're ready to go, we'll start off.
Yeah, sounds like a plan. I always do a live stream on things too, so you guys can ask that, and I might stream it onto Instagram and Twitter. Would that be okay, or would you?
No, that'd be perfectly fine, Jordan. By all means, please.
Perfect. I just always want to get permission. But yeah, I'm ready to go when you guys are.
You got it. We'll get going right now then, Jordan. Thank you very much.
All right, Jordan, nice to meet you. It's Joe here. For those unfamiliar with you, can you tell us a little about yourself?
Absolutely. So my name is Jordan Garber, and I am basically a professional wrestling journalist and referee based out of Winnipeg, Manitoba, which is kind of ironic because here in Winnipeg, we're kind of in the middle of nowhere, so there's not a lot of big, you guys are in Connecticut. So you guys have a lot close to you, like you guys have New York, or you have a lot of the East Coast. But for us, we have Minnesota and North Dakota, and then you have to go a little more down to go down to Milwaukee or Chicago. So we're kind of in the middle of nowhere, but we have a little hot wrestling scene here, and it continues to spread. So that's something I always wanted to be a part of, starting in 2008 when I went to my first show. So from there, I just started doing interviews. I wanted to be a wrestling journalist, which I had the honor and privilege to do. And then I started to referee, which was my dream. It's the second side of wrestling, and I can say I've accomplished that. So I'm pretty happy about that.
That's awesome, Jordan. For those of you that follow the podcast, this is AJ. I was a wrestler, and I worked from the Southeast. I actually was trained by Adrian Street. But when I was growing up, AWA was absolutely huge, and then you also had obviously Calgary wrestling with the Hearts and stuff of that nature. So Canada was actually somewhat of a hotbed of activity in that time period between those two wrestling organizations. And when I think of Winnipeg, obviously we think of people like Chris Jericho and the wrestlers that were developed from that area that came out and became huge names.
No, absolutely. Winnipeg has been a huge hotbed for many guys that came out of here, like the likes of Chris Jericho, like the likes of Kenny Omega, Don Callis, the list goes on and on. The wrestlers that Winnipeg has produced has been one of the most impressive, and it has to stand pretty much next to Calgary in the list of wrestling tradition that we've all had. And there's a lot of wrestlers here that were from Canada that got their start in Winnipeg by doing those Northern Death Tours, which I'm going to do in February, where you drive across the winter roads and all the wrestlers from North America meet up. So if you're not in the Manitoba wrestling scene or from it, you're still going to eventually be exposed to it because we have new guys coming in from across the states each and every day. So it's really cool to see kind of like, not really a territory back in the day, we'd call it that, but a region develop. That develops huge and get hot. And it's good to watch that. It's good to watch something grow than to watch something not grow.
True. Now, speaking of those death tours, can you tell us a little bit about Tony Candello? Because he had a really good episode on Talk is Jericho about a year ago, and you're going to be going on one of those tours for him, right?
That is correct, yeah. He was on the Talk is Jericho podcast, which is obviously Chris Jericho and Tony Candello share a very good friendship due to the fact that they have worked together. They have done these tours before, and for Chris Jericho to survive the tour gave him a huge tenacity, and then got him kind of in the ranks in Mexico, and then from Mexico he went on to Japan. So I'm going to be doing this tour, and this tour is basically a make it or break it situation. It's one of the toughest tours in professional wrestling because you're going on the ice roads for 3 weeks to different communities, and there's no hotels here. So we got to figure out our own accommodations with limited resources. So I got to make sure I pack a lot of food. I have a fear of drowning, so I sure hope I don't fall on the ice. But when it comes to stuff like that, it's kind of like something you got to put aside. Fear is always going to be in my mind when it comes to these tours. But being in the wrestling business, one of the hardest things is overcoming fear. But when you overcome it, it feels a lot better. And when I finish the tour, I'm going to be a whole new person in the wrestling business because I'm continuing to pay dues. And that's one of the hardest dues you can pay. And if I pay that due, then I can do anything. And I know I can.
Jordan, I was lucky enough to work with a few guys who went on tours up there, and they would tell me nightmare stories, especially back in, because some of them were old timers when I was starting in the 90s, and they were talking about stories in the 80s about going across those death tours and being in vans where all of a sudden the heat stops working, and you're absolutely terrified because that's not only the place where they're driving, but they're also sleeping in those vans, and just being absolutely terrified that between the hypothermia and falling through the ice, that this was going to be their last wrestling tour. So my friend, to you, hats off for going on that tour. And I will tell you, I think we all have a fear of drowning when it comes to being stuck under that ice. So how do you like refereeing? That's got to be a tremendous opportunity. And who are some of your influences when it comes to refereeing?
One of my biggest influences refereeing, basically, I was watching wrestling when I was a kid. I liked Mickey J. Henson a lot. And Mickey J. Henson was a referee you'd see from the late 80s to the early 90s to the late 2000s on SmackDown. He's been on SmackDown for a very long time. But even from the video game to watching the matches, he always stood out as the ref. You know, everyone would treat him like be an asshole to him, but he was the authority, and he would stand his ground in the ring. That's why I really like Mickey Henson. I also really enjoy watching Face the Dangerous Danny Davis. Not Nightmare, there's two of them. There's the referee and there's the wrestler. Well, they're both wrestlers, but one had the referee gimmick and was the manager of the Hart Foundation. So the Danny Davis referee was someone I was very influenced with as well. I like Nick Patrick. I'm a big fan of Nick Patrick. And then Tommy Rogers. If you want to learn how to referee, watch Tommy Rogers' match that he's refereeing. It's incredible. You learn so much. You know, I'm watching right now on my TV WWF Championship Run from 1978. And just watching the refereeing on there and just learning so much. You know, I'm watching with the Larry Sharps and the Tony Gurrias and the Nikolai Volkovs. So every day I make sure that I watch different tapes and I watch what the referee is doing, and I only watch what the referee is doing in certain cases. After I watch a certain amount of matches, I can watch the wrestling, I can enjoy the wrestling. But for now, my job is to focus on what the referee is doing and pay close attention. Because I'm someone that when I'm in the ring, I have anxiety. So if I'm in the ring and I get all uptight, I'm going to make a mistake, and I don't want to fuck up a finish. So I watch my tapes, and then when I go in the ring, I come in there with the confidence that I've done this before, and that I've been watching tapes, and I just go in there and I do it. And I just try to get better and better each and every time. That's pretty much the only way you can go about it. It's pro wrestling, and it's something that's going to take a lifetime to master.
Wow,
Amen.
so you're a real student of the game. How did you get your start in wrestling journalism? Because you said you started about 14, right?
Yeah, I started wrestling. I started interviewing wrestlers at 14, and because my dad took me out to Steeltown Pro Wrestling, which was a company back here in Winnipeg that was ran back here in 2008. And with Steeltown Pro Wrestling, they brought in some names, but it was just one of those, lower level, everyone gets their foot in the door, feet wet sort of promotion. A lot of trained guys work there, which isn't cool. I'm not kind of a big fan of that, but I was 14, 15 years old. This was 2008. And I still remember the first event I went to, Fight for the Right. So after that, I believe I had a job. I had a job where I was on school, and I just started working. So I was walking down St. James, I believe, which is a neighborhood here in Winnipeg, where they had the old Bomber Stadium. And I was walking down there, and I realized, what if I interviewed wrestlers? And I just asked them questions on Facebook, and then I put it on my blog. So I decided to do that. So my first interview was with Kamikaze, and then I started with Bobby Fox, and Bring the Pain, Matt Fairlane, all these local legends that I'd interview. I'd get them up, and then in 2013, I took a break from that. And then in 2013, I realized I did my second ever podcast. This is my first ever podcast I've ever done was in 2008 with Chuck Bader from Border City Wrestling. So that was 11 years ago. Not including the break I took, I've probably been doing this for 7 years. 2013, me and my friends decided to launch a podcast. We we did pretty good. We got some Kid Cash interviews. We got some Ahmed Johnson interviews. And we interviewed some pretty good talent. And it was a really good experience. And then that kind of transitioned to me working for Bruce Hart in 2014 with the Heartbeat Radio. And in 2015, getting the exposure on the wrestling media for the first time and working for VOC Nation and Brady Hicks. And then that's when I started refereeing and making my debut was that in 2015. I debuted in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. That was a lot of fun too. So it's just kind of cool to look back, but you can't look back too much because you always want to keep moving forward.
Jordan, I think it's great, and I think that the reason why you've transitioned as well as you have in the wrestling business when it comes to the journalism and into the podcasting is the respect that you have for the legends of wrestling. I love who you listed down for referees. We were lucky enough to have Doug Markham on for an interview, and one of the things that we talked about was the fact that referees make a wrestling match a lot of times. If you have a referee in there and you have them actually have authority and play the part well, the timing of the match and the storyline are so enriched by it that it's absolutely incredible. So to hear you talk about guys like Larry Sharp, who obviously had the Monster Factory and was able to go in there and develop so many wrestlers and quality wrestlers through that Monster Factory due to the fact that he understood the psychology of wrestling, is absolutely incredible. With that said, what are your goals going forward in wrestling? Are you looking to make it to maybe the mainstream, maybe an AEW, maybe a Ring of Honor as a referee, or are you looking to continue along the lines of the journalism?
You know what? I feel like the number one thing is that I want to have as much fun as possible doing it because I don't want to let it get in my head too much. And I kind of feel like, especially if people, my friends, people I live with, people know that. People know when things get to my head, and I don't want it to get in there too much because when I interviewed Sabu, that was really cool. That was a really good interview, and that got out really, really fast. And I was really happy with the results. And sometimes you kind of just stick to those results and not move forward. So I guess my number one goal here is no matter what happens, good, bad, or average, keep moving forward no matter what. Obviously, my goals coming up is to, score some extra work. I would love to do that. I'd love to, if I'm a referee, absolutely. My goal is to get a shot at one of the top companies. If I want to be a referee and I want to be in this business, absolutely. My goal is going to reach for the top. If I don't, that's okay, but at least I'm going to die trying. And I'm going to love what I do while doing it. And if I'm still in the business for 20 years without a shot at the top, I'm going to enjoy walking to that ring each and every time to referee a wrestling contest because that's what I love to do. So if I had an opportunity to do that as a profession every single day, legitimately, then absolutely, I would work for AEW, I would work for WWE, and I feel like from a journalism standpoint, I want to work for Pro Wrestling Illustrated too. I want to work for Wrestling Observer, wrestling radio too as well. Which I've done as well. I want to be on as many podcasts as possible. I want to referee as many shows as possible. So combined, I want to get booked as much as possible, and I just want to see how far I can reach and enjoy the ride doing it. I also want to travel as much as I can as well too, and be on a different variety amount of shows, so I have more to add to my portfolio. So when I do fill in that extra application again, I have that extra information to give to them about my background. Now, sometimes they look for people that have a lot of that. So it varies. It depends. And also another goal here is I want to eventually have some matches and wrestle, but I need to train with a reputable trainer to do that and wait at least 2 years before I step inside of a wrestling ring because that's how much I am dedicated to it. When I step in, I don't want to make any single fuck up whatsoever. So that takes 2 years of legitimate dedication. So when I feel like I'm ready to step up to the plate and take that on next year, I'll be doing that as well. I'm trying to get in with a vet trainer already said that I had the option to train with him in Edmonton, considering it, but at this time I need to add some more body mass to myself, which is another goal as well.
Now, I've heard you talk about that on several of your podcasts, and you've really exhibited a respect for the business. Now, I had a question about your podcast more in general, like, how did you transition into podcasting specifically? And what's your experience been trying to grow your product, like putting it out there and hoping to get a fan base?
Yeah, the trying to get the fan base thing has been difficult for me. Well, I'm getting the fan base when I'm interviewing the big names and I'm sending the big names along. But somehow, when I'm with the good names still, but not the biggest ones, getting a fan base is a challenge. I maintain one the best I can, and I still have a consistent amount of good listeners that listen in each and every week. But it's hard to keep a consistent fan base and do it solo while having 2 other jobs as well. So I try to maintain the best fan base I can. I make announcements on all my social media. That's my biggest weapon here is social media and word of mouth. So word of mouth, I always tell anyone I talk to in the day, doesn't matter who it is, to listen to my show. It's a setup. Like, I'll always ask anyone I run into, whether that's my boss or my friend or anyone, and I'll tell their friends to listen to it. So I promote this by word of mouth. I promote this on Facebook advertising. I promote this on as much social media as I can, and then combine it in. And then we get a consistent amount of listeners each week. Kind of cool seeing different markets and working with advertising and seeing likes from different places. Advertising technique does work, and paying for certain methods does work. But I need to get some more big names under my belt. The last time I did that was a month ago. So that's the goal too. So I can try to get as much publicity, but it's important doing the right things to lead up to that.
Well, it's funny.
What was your other question?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jordan. I was going to say, it's funny that you should mention the working. The whole reason we call ourselves the Working Fans podcast is it's a double entendre. One is we call it working because I worked in the business, but then we also call it that because all of us obviously work our day jobs and we're trying to do something that we're passionate about and something that we love, very similar to what you're going through. And when you work through that at the end of the day, people don't always realize we a lot of times are doing this. I travel, like myself, I travel an hour to get here because I wanted to be here to do this interview with you, with my co-host, and be able to sit down. And once again, that speaks to how big of a fan we are also of yours and what you're doing, the fact that it meant that much to us to be able to sit down and talk to you today.
Now, what were your feelings about that situation that happened with the ref over in England earlier this summer? Because I heard you reference it on your show, but I kind of wanted I wanted you to speak your opinion here about it.
Yeah, basically, it was really uncalled for. The referee is a very important part to a wrestling match. And if you're a referee and you've been doing it for like a very long time, there's been refs fucking 30, there's been refs for 30 years that have been doing this. And they deserve to be treated like a vet if they've been a ref for that long. It's a ref's an important job. And I feel that it was very uncalled for what happened to that referee because he needs to have that communicated. Communication is so important in this business, and if they were going to shoot on him, you know what, they should have cleared that up with the other boys first, or if there was a motive or whatever, then I don't know what the point was. Altogether here, from what it looks like from a fan standpoint, it's just unacceptable. It's just something that shouldn't be done and that shouldn't be happening. Who knows? What if they had one referee that night and that guy's down? Are they going to get a referee to do it? Like, you know what I mean? Are they going to get a wrestler to referee? Which they do, but you know, I take a lot of pride in my job. So I feel like if that happened to me, I'd be very upset, and I certainly would fight that.
Jordan, it's one of the least professional things I've ever seen in my life. Those two wrestlers, quite frankly, should not be able to get a job anywhere, in my opinion. People don't always like the fact about how hard I go at those guys, but in my opinion, it's one of the most appalling things I've ever seen. The lack of respect for the officials. Let me tell you something. If they were to take a wrestler and make them all of a sudden try to referee, how many times have we seen great wrestlers as special referees, and it's the worst thing you ever see on the planet? The timing it takes to be a great referee is so underrated. You guys are basically the maestros in there helping us get through the music, and without you guys, there's nothing that we could do about it. So it made me sick to my stomach when I saw that, and I still get pissed off just thinking about it. If I was one of the other wrestlers on that card, quite frankly, there's a good chance I might have whooped the shit out of one of those two guys.
Oh yeah, especially right when they walk to the back. That's what happens, you know?
Yeah, sometimes you need a little wrestler's justice.
Yeah, that's true. And I want to talk about referees attire too. If you're a referee as well, I'm only sure. I have black pants, a belt, black socks, black shoes.
Oh yeah, and you know what, referees.
If you're refereeing, always make sure you wear that. I don't make my big for.
No, referees should dress appropriate for it. I've been to shows where referees look like we're just pulled from the third row of the arena. without proper uniform, and it automatically, to me, takes away from the show. Because at that point, I'm sitting there going, are these guys even professionals, or are we just here to watch some backyard wrestling?
It's like a sports up.
Exactly. Guys, thank you for listening to the 531 here on YouTube this week. If you like what you hear, you can always find us on Anchor FM, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and on the Apple Podcast where you can subscribe and also give us a 5-star rating. We appreciate you listening. We want your feedback, 531, and if you agree with us, if you disagree with us, we also want you to let us know. And let us know what your 531 would be. Come up with a top 5 and let us know, and we'll tell you why you're wrong. And in order for us to do that, please contact us on Twitter. We're at Fans Working. Facebook page, Working Fans Wrestling Pod. Email workingfanswrestlingpod@gmail.com. It's very important that you actually contact us on these platforms because we want this to be your interactive place to talk wrestling.